terms of big pharma, which is a huge topic on the minds of mothers, especially. You're seeing what's happening at these school board meetings. Where do you stand on these vaccine mandates? And obviously, I know that you are pro-vaccine. Obviously, you did everything you could to get this vaccine out. I know where you stand on the vaccine.
It was one of the greatest achievements. We did it in less than 9 months.
To be able to do that. Yeah, but now it's taken a twist, right? It's gotten, now we went from, this is a good thing and people should have this option, to military men, you're going to have to resign because you're not getting this vaccine. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I stand on, forget about the mandates, that people have to have their freedom, but at the same time, the vaccine is one of the greatest achievements of mankind. We would have had in 1917, remember the Spanish flu, killed perhaps 100 million people. Actually, it ended the First World War because the soldiers were so, a lot of people don't know that. The soldiers got so sick. It was a terrible thing. There were no vaccines. There was no anything. I came up with a vaccine, with 3 vaccines. All are very, very good. Came up with 3 of them in less than 9 months. It was supposed to take 5 to 12 years.
And yet more people have died under COVID this year, by the way, under Joe Biden, than under you. And more people took the vaccine this year. So people are questioning how...
Well, no, the vaccine worked, but some people aren't taking it. The ones that get very sick and go to the hospital are the ones that don't take the vaccine. But it's still their choice. And if you take the vaccine, you're protected. Look, the results of the vaccine are very good. And if you do get it, it's a very minor form. People aren't dying when they take the vaccine.
What about the masking of children? That's a big one for moms right now.
I think it's a terrible thing.
That flies in the face of science. The kids have a virtual 0% chance of dying of COVID, and yet they're insisting on these vaccine mandates. I mean, I'm sorry, on these masking mandates, and now even the vaccine mandates for small children. And what's going on there?
I think what's happening is you look at the masks where Fauci and a lot of other people said masks don't mean anything. All of a sudden he becomes a radical masker. Crazy. I don't like to see the kids with the masks on. They're sitting in school. They have a hard enough time sitting in school.
Looks like China. I've been to China.
Well, and yet China's education system's a hell of a lot better than ours. You know what? They're rated number 2 or 3, and we're rated number 44.
But masking children, I mean,
it's bad.
The way it looks, right? It doesn't look like a free country.
I'm against it.
This is Candace Owens trying to gin up the usual culture war issue of vaccines bad, only to be repudiated by, of all people, Donald Trump. And so what happened was Candace Owens was clearly looking for Trump to validate her anti-vax strategy, a strategy that she's been open about, like this Facebook post where she said she was proud to not be vaccinated, except he didn't. And let me just say, when you're interviewing Donald Trump and you sound like the crazy one, it might just be time to reassess. Now, I'm no expert, but I would venture to guess that maybe, just maybe, Donald Trump doesn't love the idea that his own supporters are dying at an exponentially higher rate than everyone else, thanks to the fact that right-wing media traffics almost exclusively in anti-vax sentiment every chance it gets. And the results have been devastating for Republicans. Here's a chart showing deaths in Trump voting counties and states versus Biden voting counties and states from the first half of the pandemic to now, the second half of the pandemic. In the beginning of the pandemic, deaths per capita were higher in Biden voting states and Biden voting counties. Now deaths per capita have plummeted in Biden voting counties and states, while they've surged in Trump voting states and counties. But despite all of that, Republicans and conservative pundits have continued their assault on vaccines, even in the face of irrefutable evidence that their words are leading to vaccine skepticism, thereby putting their own viewers at exponentially higher risk to die from COVID. And yet still they won't change their tune because their only priority was winning a culture war. Worth it, huh? And of course, Owens' misstep was further put on full display given the fact that she was forced to pivot immediately to some other culture war issue like masking children. Oh, the humanity. Asking children to wear masks so that they don't carry the virus and then bring it home to family members. God forbid. But this just goes to show that the only way the right-wing ecosystem can function is if they're opposing some safety measure. If it was enacted to help people survive, Republican mouthpieces like Candace Owens will complain about it. Not because it's not effective, of course it is, but because she knows that she can profit by ginning up culture war issues and exploiting them for her own personal gain. She knows full well that if a kid isn't masked and exposed to the virus and then goes home to a grandparent, that grandparent could very well die as a result of that. But that's not her priority. Getting her viewers worked into a frenzy over any culture war issue is the priority. Tribalism is the priority because scoring cheap political points is clearly worth a hell of a lot more to her than her viewers' own survival. Now, as far as Trump is concerned, two things can be true at once. First is that a disproportionate number of Republicans opposing safety measures, including vaccines, is owed in large part to Trump himself. Remember, he was the one who spent the latter half of his presidency pretending that the virus was no big deal. He even refused to publicize the fact that he himself got the vaccine in January. Why? Because he knew full well that he'd groomed his base to be anti-vax and that doing so would undermine his team. Like, not for nothing, but you don't refuse to tell anyone you got the vaccine if you are in any way trying to encourage vaccinations. Let's just be honest here. But second is that it is objectively good that he did this. The simple fact is that we need more people to get vaccinated in this country because the more people who are unvaccinated, the more people who can get infected. The more people who can get infected, the more opportunity the virus has to mutate. And if the virus mutates enough, there is of course the possibility that this vaccine could be rendered ineffective and we could be right back at square one. So any way to encourage more people to get the shot is welcome. And if that means Donald Trump has to couch his entire encouragement in a self-congratulatory ego trip, fine. Most people should be able to espouse the bare minimum in service of public health, but if you can't do it without filleting yourself, then so be it. But this should be a lesson to right-wing media that if even Donald Trump, the guy who was probably responsible for giving his own aides and advisors COVID, the guy who was probably responsible for landing Chris Christie in the hospital where he almost died of COVID, the guy who decided to hold a rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma where Herman Cain got COVID and did die, the guy who was responsible for allowing this virus to explode throughout the country in the first place, if he has the basic sense to acknowledge, hey, maybe we shouldn't give our own supporters advice that is killing them by the tens of thousands, then maybe the rest of these clowns should wake up and recognize that perpetuating a pandemic might not be worth whatever political points you think you're scoring by pretending that dying somehow makes you more free. Just, you know, for starters. To see more videos like this, click the subscribe button right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work, subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. I cover the most important stories each week, and my guest is always one of the top political figures, including Vice President Kamala Harris, Jen Psaki, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, Nancy Pelosi, Katie Porter, Cory Booker, and so many more. The podcast link is also right here on this screen, so give it a listen and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.